Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm joined by Minister of Justice and Attorney General Amery to share an important update on our work to protect children and families in Alberta and support women and girls in sport. Today, our government is introducing Bill 9, the Protecting Alberta's Children Statutes Amendment Act. Bill 9 will invoke the Canadian Charter's notwithstanding clause and to amend and uphold three critical pieces of legislation without further court delay or uncertainty. The Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, the Education Amendment Act 2024, and the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act 2024. The notwithstanding clause will apply to the following pieces of legislation. Bill 26, the Health Statute Amendment Act 2024, prohibits both gender reassignment surgery for children under 18 and the provision of puberty blockers and hormone replacement treatments for the purpose of gender reassignment to children under 16. Bill 27, the Education Amendment Act 2024, requires schools to obtain parental consent when a student under 16 years of age wishes to change his or her name or pronouns for reasons related to the student's gender identity, and requires parental opt-in consent to teaching on gender identity, sexual orientation, or human sexuality. Bill 29, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, requires the governing bodies of amateur competitive sports in Alberta to implement policies that limit participation in women's and girls' sports to those who were born female. We have heard from families, teachers, athletes, coaches, and young people themselves, and we respect that there are strong feelings on every side of this conversation. We have also consulted with medical professionals here and in other jurisdictions and learned how standards of care and best practices to support children and families have evolved with new research over time. As a government, we have a responsibility to provide clarity, a responsibility to protect all children and youth, and a responsibility to give parents, not institutions or courts, the primary role in life-changing decisions about their children. This government does not turn to the notwithstanding clause unless the stakes warrant it. And in this case, the stakes could not be higher. This is one of the most consequential actions our government will take during our time in office. The notwithstanding clause is part of Canada's system of parliamentary democracy. It exists to balance the power of the courts and the authority of democratically elected governments. By invoking it, we're keeping these decisions in the hands of those who are directly accountable to Albertans and ensuring these protections can move forward without further court delay or uncertainty. These measures reflect the views of an overwhelming majority of Albertans, and it is our responsibility to make sure that they are not overturned. This is not a hypothetical discussion. This suite of legislation is in active litigation right now. At this moment, we have 3 lawsuits working their way through the courts with 1 injunction in place. These lawsuits could take years to resolve, including possible appeals to the Supreme Court. These delays are not acceptable to this government when children are in harm's way. We want every young Albertan to receive the mental health supports, the compassion, and the guidance that they need at home, at school, and in their communities. We also want adults to receive the care and support they need to live the life that they choose. This legislation is not about denying care. We cannot and will not take the risk of a child undergoing medical, hormonal, or surgical interventions that could permanently limit or eliminate the choices they may want to make as an adult to have children of their own one day. Before I wrap up, I do want to speak directly to young Albertans who are navigating what their identity means through the already difficult process of growing up. You deserve dignity, understanding, and support. We will never stop working to keep you safe. You belong in Alberta. We firmly believe that. We also believe it's our duty to protect you. This legislation is about your future, so when the time comes, you have every opportunity to make the adult decisions that are rightfully yours and yours alone. Thank you, and I'd like to hand it over to Minister Amery to provide more details about Bill 9.
Well, thank you very much, Premier, for those very important remarks. I want to start by saying how incredibly proud I am to be part of a government that cares deeply about children and youth, and also will take action to protect our children, their health, and their well-being when stakes are this high. As a parent and as an elected official, I believe that we have a duty to protect our children and youth and provide safeguards for their futures so they can grow, they can learn, and they can mature to make informed decisions as adults. That's why we introduced 3 pieces of legislation last fall to do just that. protecting all children and youth, ensuring parents know that they are the primary caregivers in their children's lives, and ensuring fair play for women and girls in sport. We've said previously that we're prepared to use every single legal and constitutional tool available to protect the well-being of young people. And that's why we'll be invoking the notwithstanding clause in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Alberta Bill of Rights, and the Alberta Human Rights Act to these three critical pieces of legislation. We believe that this is a necessary measure to ensure that these laws stand without further court delay or uncertainty. The Premier touched upon the lawsuits working their way through the courts. When it is children at the center of these court challenges and decisions, we have a moral imperative to move forward in the best interests of children and their futures. Before I wrap up, I want to be clear what the notwithstanding clause is and why it's a tool that elected legislatures use. The notwithstanding clause is integral to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and a vital provincial constitutional right. It's intended to preserve the ability of elected legislatures to make final policy choices in the interests of the public. We've heard from Albertans, and they expect us to deliver on our mandate to protect young people and their families. We'll not apologize for putting our children first. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now enter the media Q&A. First, just a reminder for those on the line and in the room that this press conference, the remarks, and any QA related to the bill are under embargo. We do not expect the bill to be tabled until Wednesday, and the embargo is in effect until the bill is tabled. I'm happy to answer any questions about the embargo lift and the timing of that following the conclusion of the press conference, and I encourage you guys to reach out to me directly. Yes, I'm happy to answer those after the press conference. We'll get into the Q&A for now. And the reminder that the embargo is still in effect. We'll start off, of course, with questions in the room before making our way to the phones. One question, one follow-up as per usual, and I'll see a show of hands for questions in the room. Gotcha. We'll start with Emmanuel, and then we'll go to Morgan.
In the briefing notes we received this morning, it was said that the government's position was that by invoking the notwithstanding clause, every court challenge would be basically ended. How is that the case? Because in Saskatchewan, there is a court challenge on a pronoun bill, and even when they invoked the notwithstanding clause, the Supreme Court said, yes, we're going to hear it. So why do you think that this case in Alberta here is different than what happened in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. It's our understanding, it's our position that invoking the notwithstanding clause is the end of this, the litigation process in the existing three challenges to this particular case. We know that the Supreme Court is dealing with a number of questions as it relates to the notwithstanding clause and whether courts can still weigh in once the notwithstanding clause is invoked. But we don't have a decision on that yet, and we are confident that the Supreme Court will do the right thing and uphold parliamentary supremacy. The notwithstanding clause is a tool that exists within our charter to allow provinces and the federal government to invoke the clause when and if needed, and it's our position that that would be the end of the litigation.
Okay, question for the Premier and Minister, you can weigh in if you want, but what was the reasoning behind this decision to invoke the notwithstanding clause? Did you only do it because you thought you were going to lose the court challenges?
Well, look, no, we're very confident in our position. We always have been, we always will be. But there is a process in place that can take years to resolve. We know that the courts may take a number of years. We know that we're in litigation on any number of cases that go through the court system and take a long time to be addressed. In the meantime, there are significant risk of harm to our young people in this province, and we need to take action immediately to address that.
An Alberta Court of King's Bench judge ruled that there would be significant harm if the bill was enacted. So now you're saying that there's also significant harm if the bill. What's your position on it?
So the Court of King's Bench invoked a temporary injunction until the actual case was heard. But we're looking at medical experts all across Canada and in other jurisdictions who have addressed this issue as well. That we know that, for example, in Sweden, for example, we know that their health authority concluded that given the current evidence that exists, the risk of puberty blockers and gender-affirming treatments outweigh the benefits for young people. And so we know that from authorities both within Canada and abroad that there is risk to young folks in continuing these treatments, and we prefer to err on the side of caution and take action immediately.
Awesome. And we'll go to Morgan and then to Michelle.
I think, Premier, and also for the Minister, we've heard some concerns from Albertans that are wondering why the government is using the notwithstanding clause so frequently. A lot of people were unfamiliar with it, now they're learning more about it, and they're worried about this being always the move that they perceive the government goes to when things aren't going their way. So what is your response to those Albertans that are concerned about the frequency of the notwithstanding clause and the use of it?
Well, let's talk about the frequency for just a moment. The notwithstanding clause was part of the Canadian Charter in 1982. Since that time, it's been invoked once in the early 2000s, once recently, and then again for these bills. I would argue that it's not used frequently. In fact, we very, very much carefully assess each and every time that we need to use this. But the fact of the matter is this: at the end of the day, I'll stand by this. We're prepared, again, to use every single legal and constitutional tool to make sure that the health and well-being of our children are protected. And when you have medical experts all across the world arguing that there is a significant detriment to the development of young people, this is one of those things that we think is an appropriate use of the notwithstanding clause. We'll stand behind that.
And I'll just add, and I've said it before, that if the courts are going to behave irresponsibly, then they should expect that legislatures are going to respond. And essentially declaring a charter right to possess child pornography, as they did a couple of weeks ago, that to me is a demonstration that the courts are not consistent with the values that Albertans or Canadians have. It was a 5-4 court decision, so the court isn't even in full agreement of that decision. And what we're observing is, rather than deal with the cases at hand, and in that case, two horrendous pedophiles with graphic, awful images of children, the court decided to pluck a hypothetical case out of the air in order to strike down mandatory sentencing. So I would say that the court should begin to expect that if they are going to make decisions like that, they're going to see more legislatures take the action that we did. We just simply don't believe that with the evidence changing as it is, we don't believe it's in the best interest of children to delay for years before a court ultimately makes a decision. We want to make sure that kids' right to be able to have children of their own one day is preserved.
And then my follow-up, Premier, for you, we just heard from some folks outside that feel that this legislation and the use of the notwithstanding clause is not in the best interest of kids. And we heard from young people, we heard from trans folks who were once young people and accessed this gender-affirming care. So what would your message be to them who say that this is hurting them and hurting the future of children?
Well, kids have to go through puberty in order to be able to have kids. That's just the way it is. This is becoming sexually mature means. And we want to make sure that at the age of 16, when they're old enough to be able to make these decisions for themselves and understand the full consequences of it, they can begin that journey. But we know that when we have all kinds of laws on those who are under the age of 15, we don't allow them to smoke, we don't allow them to drive alone, we don't allow them to do drugs, we don't allow them to sign contracts, they can't get a credit card. They can't even go on a field trip to the zoo without getting their parents' permission. So if we accept that we have to be able to have a certain level of rigor over those who are minors, 15 years of age and younger, then we have to have that rigor. And if they are contemplating making permanent changes to their ability to have kids, permanent changes to their body, those decisions have to be made when they're mature enough to understand the consequences of that. So I think that we're on solid ground with the parents who are concerned about their kids. We're on solid ground with the general public, and that's the reason why we've decided to take this action.
Awesome. Can I see a show of hands again? Awesome. We'll go to Michelle, then to Sean.
Premier, your party supporters place great value on parental rights, for example, over what a child learns in school or even what vaccines they receive. The parents of a transgender minor are involved in their care along with a physician. So why do parental rights not matter when it comes to the health of a transgender minor?
Well, I would say that because there's certain decisions that only that child can make. I don't believe that it's right for anyone to make a decision to sterilize a child except for that child when they understand the consequences of it. And that's part of the reason why we believe at the age of 16, there's been some jurisprudence around when children can start making medical decisions on their own. That may be when they begin taking puberty blockers or other hormones, and age 18, when they're full adults, is when they can engage in surgery. And those are some of the decisions that we've made based on some of the emerging evidence that is out there, some of the changes that we're seeing in jurisdictions around the world, and we think it strikes the right balance.
But people would argue that, for instance, withholding a vaccine, like a measles vaccine, for example, from a child is equally, harmful to the child. So I'm not really sure what the difference is here.
Well,
In terms of care for a transgendered minor that is done in coordination with their parents and a physician.
yeah.
And withholding, a parent deciding not to vaccinate their child.
Well, I think it's a pretty big difference. One may, the one that we're dealing with here today, having physical surgery that prevents you from being able to have children is I think a whole order of magnitude difference.
People under 18 could never have surgery.
Well,
It's the puberty blocker.
Well,
which are
no,
prohibited.
there are mastectomies that were taking place under the age of 18, yes. And we were watching as various organizations were suggesting that those kinds of surgeries should be done younger and younger and younger. We disagree. We think those kinds of surgeries should only happen at the age of 18 and older. And we also looking at the international evidence that's emerging that we believe that children should go through puberty before halting it so that they can make sure that they have kids of their own one day. If you don't become sexually mature, you can't have kids. And that's what we're trying to preserve.
Thanks. And we'll go to Sean, then Cindy, and then we're going to take a few from the phones.
Premier, you identified a Grey Cup deadline for pipeline progress for Mark Carney and the federal government. That has come and gone. You initially threatened an unprecedented national unity crisis if you didn't see the progress that you were looking for. So what's the latest on that? Are we going to get a new pipeline for Alberta soon?
Well, I would say I'm encouraged at the conversations we've been having. We are working on an MOU that deals with comprehensively the issue of getting more bitumen to Asian markets, the Pathways project and our joint support of that, as well as the 9 bad laws that are impairing our investment climate. It's a little bit more complicated than just getting a project on a list because it's got 3 parts to it. But we're very close, I think, to coming to terms on a pathway that would get there. And once we know for sure, we'll make sure that you know, and we'll share that with the public.
What do you say to Albertans, though, many of them on the right side, Alberta Republicans, for example, who say you're delusional? Like, I understand you're trying to be patient on this, but are you frustrated? I'm starting to see F. Carney stickers around Alberta of people saying he's just as bad as the last person. He's never going to give us a pipeline, and you're being conned by, a smart salesman.
Well, I would say that the market is already responding to his indication through the budget on the emissions cap and the direction that the federal government might be going there. And so I'll tell you what I am seeing. I'm seeing Enbridge announce that they're going to expand their mainline 400,000 barrels. I'm seeing TMX announce that they also want to expand their operations another 400,000 barrels. I'm seeing South Bow say that they want to build a 650,000 barrel a day line to the United States based on existing Keystone infrastructure. I'm hearing from the group that runs the St. Lawrence Seaway that they're wondering if we can load up oil on tankers from Thunder Bay and get them out to to Europe. I'm hearing a proposal coming for oil by rail to Sydney, Nova Scotia. I'm hearing Wabkanu talk about expanding the ability of Churchill to operate more days around the year using icebreakers so that we can open trade, and being very open to talking about all comers when it comes to those kind of pipeline projects. I have an MOU with Doug so that we can talk about how we might be able to get a spur line going up to James Bay. So I would say yes, I think the most important new market expansion for our product is going to be another Asian pipeline or another pipeline to the West Coast so we can reach Asian markets. But I would say just those ones that I mentioned are probably 2 million barrels of oil a day. So I tend to look at the situation as glass half full. And I do think that it's better for our country to demonstrate that we can get projects built in all directions. That's why we're going to continue on the pipeline projects that I think should have been built all along, which was some version of Northern Gateway. So I would say that it's all of the above in our case, and we're just wanting to make sure that we identify a few more things that we can change with the federal government to ensure that all of those projects go ahead.
Thank you. We'll go to Cindy and then take a few from the phones.
So you're saying that these court challenges can take years and years?
Yeah.
Can being the operative word, so I'm wondering what's the threshold then for deciding that these potential legal delays justify overriding fundamental rights?
Well, the simple answer to that is the detrimental harm to our children in the meantime. We say can, but these are claims that have been filed by groups, some operating within Alberta, some operating elsewhere, who are challenging the three statutes that we brought in, the three bills that we brought in the ones that we mentioned earlier. But the detrimental impact to children necessitates that we take immediate action right now.
So then what's the detrimental harm of pronouns? If you're saying that these pieces of legislation, you're trying to prevent these harm to students, children, and trans folks, what's the harm of pronouns then?
Well, a number of different issues. I mean, we know that children are dealing with gender identity issues all across this province, and we know that parents have been asking to become more involved and more informed about what is happening. We've always said that parental choice is absolutely paramount for us as a parent. It's important for me as well, and I want to know what's happening with my kids, both within their school and concerning their health. This, I think, is a common sentiment all across our province. Our parents are asking to be more involved, and this is a move in the direction to make sure that parents are heard.
I mean, I think when we started this, we mentioned a story that appeared in French CBC, never got reported in English, but French CBC went into a gender clinic with a child actress who was 14, who was able to, on 10 minutes, get testosterone without parental consent, without knowing what her history was. Those are the kind of things that we don't want happening in Alberta. If children are going to go down this pathway, whether it begins with pronouns or moves to puberty blockers or ultimately goes on to surgery, we don't want there to be any disconnect with their families on that. And so that's a part of the reason why. For those under the age of 15, when their parents are the legal guardian, they will have to be informed and approve. And then at age 16 and over, they will just have to be informed.
All right, thank you. We're going to take a couple questions from the phones now. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
The first question is from Rick Bell from Post Media. Your line is now open.
Good afternoon, Premier. Just following on that question previously about pipelines and Prime Minister Carney, maybe you can explain, does the federal government, the Carney government, the Prime Minister, his negotiators, do they realize what the consequences will be if after all this buildup about we're very close and it might be just a few days from now, if all this buildup turns at some point to be all for naught or is delayed further beyond a few more days, do the people across the table from your negotiators know the consequences of that and how Albertans would feel?
Yes, I've had a chance to talk to the Prime Minister about that myself. And I said, we need to show Albertans that the country works again. And the way you show Albertans that the country works again is that you ensure that their product isn't landlocked and that there aren't unfair rules that are preventing investment. So the Prime Minister and I have had a chance to speak about that several times, which is why we engaged in the discussions that we've had in the first place to find a way to come to terms on the 9 bad laws that have been passed by a former government and where we think we need to go in this new environment. So yes, I think the Prime Minister fully understands and has the same sense of urgency that I do. Remember, he was a Bank of England governor during Brexit, and that was a vote that was to remain in the European Union. But emotion ended up, I think, overtaking the conversation, and it went very different than anybody anticipated. So I'm quite sure he doesn't want to see a repeat of that any more than I do.
So given that you say he understands that, is there? I think you said in a statement a few days ago, we'll know in the next few days whether or not that the federal government is serious about this. Is there really a chance for an or not? In other words, is this just a case of tying up a few loose ends, and that does take a few days? Or is this a case of where the idea that it wouldn't go through is still a possibility?
Well, I think we have to be realistic that there are certain members of his caucus and cabinet who are going to have to come to terms with doing a 180 on some of the bad laws that they supported and voted for over the past 10 years. And that is possible. Politicians have been known when they realize that they've made an error, that they have to go in a different direction. And I think that that's what the last election was about. It was about the Liberal Party realizing they'd made an error and they needed to start talking about becoming a strong economy that's an energy superpower. So it may well be that there are some members of his caucus who are not fully on board with that new vision, but I will know in a matter of days whether or not they're influential enough to change the direction that I think that the Prime Minister and I want to go. I think we both are very keen to get a memorandum of understanding, but we'll know in a few more days.
Thanks, Rick. We have time for 2 more questions. We're going to take 1 more from the phones, then come back to the room to Jeremy. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Your next question is from Will Visser from Western Standard. Your line is now open.
Hi, Premier. I'm just curious specifically on Bill 29, what your guys' reasoning was for feeling that you need to invoke the notwithstanding clause in this situation.
I think that one's the sports.
Fairness in sport, yeah. Yeah, most certainly. Thank you for that question. You know, we've heard from parents, from students, from young people all across our province, especially and in particular women and girls in sport. And we know that the situation has been communicated to us that women and children, women and girls feel that this creates an unfair scenario for them. It discourages them from participating in sport. We know that folks women and girls that are participating in sports want to be competitive with one another. They want to be able to participate in these and are free from dealing with the situation of biological males participating within female sports. We know that we've had, I think when we announced the Bill 29 as well as Bill 27, 26, we had validators who had been negatively impacted by this as well. The amendment that we're bringing forward will deal with all of these bills that were introduced last spring, and that's particularly because we want to deal with it in one sweeping amendment. We're not going to come back each and every time to introduce the notwithstanding clause on another bill if and when the need arises. This is needed now. It's needed to be a sweeping motion that addresses all 3 of these acts, and that's why it's coming forward in this amendment act here.
Yeah, and I might also say when we talk about the world evolving, I'll just note that the International Olympic Committee is probably months away from deciding to ban transgender women in female Olympic events. And so it's a very active conversation in the sporting community about how we create fairness. If there were no difference between boys and girls and men and women, we wouldn't have a women and girls category at all. And so I think that's what we're trying to return to is let's make sure that we're protecting the female athletes and ensure that there are co-ed or all gender categories so that everybody has the opportunity to participate in sport. But let's have a hybrid approach so that women and girls sport can be protected too.
Thank you. And then my second question, Premier, you mentioned the need to get Alberta's oil and gas to an Asian market, and recent relations with the UAE have really increased. Do you believe that the UAE could be a solution for that problem?
Well, I think that the solution that we might find in the Middle East might be a little bit different. At the ADIPEC conference, there were 130 Canadian companies, service companies, that were there seeking to do more work internationally. I mean, we have one company comes to mind, Streamflow. I got a chance to visit with them. They provide 85% of the valves around the world. And so they're looking to be able to expand their footprint. And they had a booth at ADIPEC. And so there's countless other companies that are doing the same thing. And that's, so I think that is part of the reason why we like to do those trade missions, to understand what the opportunity is in other jurisdictions so that every part of our industry is able to benefit from it. I think the benefit of having a good relationship with countries that have massive sovereign wealth funds is so that they can invest in our country. We've got a lot of additional new projects that need to be built. If you look at the major projects list, and many more to come, the sovereign wealth funds of the UAE are already invested $30 billion resource in Canada, and a lot of that is in Alberta with the investment in Nova and the expansion of other interests there, and being able to have others of a similar nature with massive sovereign wealth consider investing to help us develop out in a co-investment. I think that that's a positive thing. The other aspect is the information and technology exchange. What I'm struck by is that both ADNOC as well as Aramco are well advanced on using AI to be able to develop use cases for how to optimize their resource, identify corrosion. They're using robotics. So I think that there's a great opportunity for information exchange. In addition, both of those companies are very keen to play a key role in looking at overarching solutions for carbon capture utilization and storage, for fuel switching, for nature-based solutions. So I think there's good reason for us to partner with those countries and companies that share a similar vision for how we develop our resources responsibly.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Just another reminder, of course, this press conference and any QA related to the bill are under embargo until the bill is tabled. We expect the bill to be tabled on Wednesday, and with that, we'll go to Jeremy for our last question.
Premier, wondering, obviously the use of the notwithstanding clauses is a very serious step to take. What rights do you need it to override? Is it specifically sort of the legal right for groups to fight back against this legislation, or are there other rights that you need the notwithstanding clause in this circumstances with these three bills to override?
Well, I had hoped that we would have been able to go to court on this, and because I firmly believe that Section 1 of the charter gives us the latitude as a government to balance rights and to make sure that we're making decisions that are minimally intrusive in a free and democratic society. That's what Section 1 allows you to do. It does allow you to make certain changes and pass certain laws. But the problem that we have is that we have watched a court process where if they put an injunction in place and prevent these laws from being enacted, it could potentially be years before they're resolved. And we're just wanting to make sure that no other kids make premature decisions that they might ultimately regret. We want to support children when they're old enough to understand the consequences of those decisions. And so that's why we're trying to be minimally intrusive in those decisions. But we do know that when a child is 15 and under, that is way too young to be making decisions that'll affect their future fertility. So that's a judgment that we've made. And we'll watch and see if there is any additional commentary that happens in the court.
Follow up, we heard during the tech briefing, and perhaps this is for Minister Amery, but we heard during the tech briefing that there is, the use of the notwithstanding clause through the charter comes with a 5-year time limit. That might not be the same case with the Alberta Bill of Rights. Can you explain the difference there and what the intention is as far as how long this will last?
Yeah, most certainly. The use of the notwithstanding clause, Section 33 of the charter, is for a 5-year term. The notwithstanding clauses or the exclusionary clauses in the Bill of Rights and the Alberta, the Human Rights Act will be permanent.
Awesome. And that'll conclude today's press conference. Thank you, everyone,
Thanks,
for joining us.